options about how we can meet the needs of today and tomorrow, keeping our environment safe, dealing with the issues of not enough renewable resources. So what we're going to talk about for this discussion is kind of like an overview of everything, talk about some issues that we didn't talk about in our smaller groups. And so just to go over everything again, I know you guys know it, but option one suggested a more urgent approach. The government needs to take a lot of action. People need to change their lifestyles drastically and immediately. Option two was a little bit less drastic, more focused on innovation and education and creating new technology that's going to provide the solution for our overuse of non-renewable resources. And option three called for a change in culture, focusing on frugality, altruism, and social connections. So I just wanted to see what you guys had to say about each option. Like, what are the advantages and disadvantages that you guys think about options 1, 2, and 3? If anyone wants to start.
Okay. I don't know, when we were reviewing the 3 options, I kind of felt that each one on its own was either too radical or not enough to make like substantial changes. Like option 1, not many people would be on board with doing something like that. Option 2, we kind of came to the consensus that we can't guarantee that in the long run that would prove to be successful, and by the time we do start making those technological innovations, it might be too late. And the third option was also something that would take a long time to accomplish for like a full-scale culture change, and it might also be something a lot of people are opposed to.
Right. So, how practical is each option, starting with option 1? What do you guys think about that?
I don't think option 1 is very practical because I think it would be ridiculously hard to convince the general public to change their lifestyle based on something that might happen. That's not concrete.
I also don't think option 1 is that practical because it calls for government regulation, and that would would definitely cost taxpayers money. And I think a lot of people would be upset about the government spending money on sustainability when we have other issues like education and the economy to worry about.
Yeah, I think our biggest, like my group's biggest answer to that, we saw that it would cost the government money, and so we were just talking about how raising gas prices would be one of the best ways to go about bringing attention to the topic, and at the same time, like the extra money that you get from the raised gas prices, it would just be like a government tax. The government would take that money and put that towards research and development of like renewable energy sources and stuff like that, and clean energy. So that was our answer to that comment.
Option 2 is practicality. What do you guys think?
I'm a huge proponent of option 2. I think that's the one that's going to work the best. We've relied on technology to solve mostly all of our problems throughout history, and it's seemed to work for us so far. And it will probably still work because our technology just keeps getting better and better, and we looked forward. I mean, we look for new innovations and new different energies that we can do, and that's really the only way we can solve anything, is if we have better technology that can cope with society.
We've already solved a lot of the problems. Like, we know how to find other energy sources. It's just about making them efficient now. So it's the technology is there, we just have to improve it. So I think it is a viable option, and it's the most practical one because I think a lot of people would be supportive of it.
Does the fact that, Americans only make up 5% of the world's population, but we're using 25% of the resources, does that make a difference in the time that option 2 might take to make a difference to you guys?
Not really. A lot of the research that's going to renewable energy isn't even done in the United States. Like, it's done in different European countries. The European countries in general produce most of our scientific research in our day and age, so I mean, they cope with a lot of what America uses up. It's something that we could easily handle with.
Not to be devil's advocate, but I just thought it was really interesting. Option 3 brings up the fact that if we were to make things more accessible and find these newer energy sources, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but like it poses the question that if we have these renewable sources, will we use more? Like, cars and like gas mileage and gas efficiency, even though fuel efficiency has increased, people buy more cars because gas prices are cheaper and because cars can go longer distances. You know, like, you guys know what I'm talking about? Like, excerpt. So I'm just wondering, like, even if we have the technology to push forward so much, will we, like, take it for granted and buy more cars because, you know, they'll go farther, or like,
If you make
you know what I mean?
Well, to go against the car example,
It's just an
actually,
example, yeah,
well,
yeah.
actually, like, going against the car example though, we developed, I don't know if you've read recently, we developed supercapacitors, which they're trying to enable us to charge an entire car in 5 minutes, which would be, they would switch out gas pumps and everything for that, for something that involves with these supercapacitors in order to charge an entire car. So if we could invent some renewable energy just to solve with the electricity problem, then that would be something that we could move away from oil. It's actually becoming more and more practical since these guys have developed it. And I don't know, that's something that just came up recently that is able to take a lot of the fossil fuels out. And we're able to move more towards electricity. And if we go towards there, then having renewable resources would be even more efficient.
Well, remember that the majority of electricity produced in the United States is produced by fossil fuels. So, I know we're going that way, and it is more efficient, but it's not a permanent solution to avoiding fossil fuels.
And, like, to kind of contradict, or like, go against like Gabe's that it's sorry. Well, like, that's awesome that we're finding, like, better ways to use less, like, I don't know, supplies and fuel and stuff. It's not the norm to go out, like, I mean, it's becoming more normative to go out and buy a Prius, but still, like, we still have this idea that we want to buy these, like, Hummers and these gas-guzzling cars. Like, people still opt for, like, those SUVs over a Prius. Like, I know, and that's why I think option 3 is the best, because I feel like until those, like, I don't know, greener products are the norm, it doesn't matter how great they are. Like, no one wants them. Then you can make the greatest car ever, but if it's not, like, the trend or, like, the culture, then no one's gonna buy it.
My one problem with option 2 is that, like, the practicality of using these alternative methods is pretty obvious. Like, we all see the use of using eco-friendly methods. My problem with it is that it's not, like, the efficiency isn't equal yet, and it's also not, like, the availability is minimal. Like, it's not available to every person either because it's difficult to get it, or it's just incredibly expensive. Like, solar panels are very expensive. So maybe if we were to, I don't know how we would go about doing this, but maybe if we were to, like, create incentive or create funding for developing these new methods, like creating this new technology, that would make it cheaper and easier for people to get their hands on it. And it would probably also show that, you know, these methods are efficient, they are practical.
So it seems like everything, money makes the world go round, so you need funding to do anything. Funding usually means that someone has to pay, someone is gonna get the short end of the stick, someone has to pay for it. So as a group, what do we think? Do we think that the short end of the stick should be like the general public, should it be the government, should it be businesses and corporations? Does that make a difference on which option makes the most sense for today's society?
Well, in option 2, they talk about not like giving someone the short end of the stick, but I know it would cost companies obviously more money to do things that are more energy efficient just because the technology isn't as available as it is in other ways. So it talked about like giving companies who like make an effort to use more energy efficient methods, like incentives, like there was like some corporation that like gave them some kind of, I don't know what company it was, but like companies that like would like team up with environmentalists and stuff like that, they would get like some kind of monetary like not prize, but like reward, yeah. And so that's one way that the government could push companies to kind of make advancements that are more energy efficient.
So those are like subsidies, I think.
Yeah.
I think that one option we could do relating to option 1 would be to take like away from some of the subsidies to
switching gears a little bit, the media, I don't know how much each group talked about this, but we kind of get all of our information from the media, and as a general public, we don't really like to sit and listen to like a long explanation of something. So how do you think that the media will portray each option, and their, knowing how that influences public opinion, is that gonna make a difference?
I think if someone sat down and took the time to make, like a really thought-provoking video that a lot of people were interested in rather than just like hearing facts, like, something with like more ethos and pathos and logos in it, I think it would have a huge effect because, I remember when that Coney video came out last year, like in literally 2 days, everyone had seen it, and it was like the thing, and like, of course there have been humanitarian efforts like that in the past, and we all knew about child soldiers, but it wasn't really brought to everyone's media attention until that video came out. And it was worldwide, so, like, it can be done.
It can be done and it should be done. You're talking about like the media and like corporations that have the potential to make these kinds of advertisements unfortunately own a lot of companies and products that aren't nearly as eco-friendly. So I think in order for them to start shifting over to making like advertising products that are more environmentally safe, there would need to be a huge trend in the public purchasing more eco-friendly options in order for that to be like an effective campaign method.
I mean, I know people don't want to sit there and like listen to the facts, but people really do need to know the facts in order to make like an educated decision on what they think is the best opinion. Like you can't, like you could use the media to get people to care about it, but people really need to like research it for themselves. Like Priuses, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that like they're not really that great because the battery is like something like, it's like different than other cars obviously, and by the time it takes to like dispose of that battery and like all the energy it takes, it's like much worse than just driving a regular car that isn't like that. So like a lot of people don't know that, but everyone thinks Priuses are like the greatest thing in the world, but they're probably not. And like people need to like like the media can get people to care about the issues, like make it a thing, like Bella was saying, like make people interested and make people want to do something, but people need to know the facts for themselves also, and not just get them from media who could be, like you said, like they own a lot of the companies, they could just be changing the way things are. Yeah.
Anyone want to add to that before I switch yet? No? Alright. Next thing, what might be some of the political backlash for each option? Starting with option 1, call for a lot of government action. How do you think that is going to play out in Washington?
Well, we talked about if people got on board with this in the government, that they would probably, and the public didn't approve of whatever option, they would probably just immediately vote them out of office. So, I mean, I think there would be a lot of government backlash for most of the options.
So how do you go about making sure that policies that are instated aren't just repealed immediately?
I think you have to make it friendly to the public. I think it has to be an option that people won't be so upset about that they'll want to vote the people out of office. I think it needs to be some compromise between all 3 of the options that makes it a drastic change, but over kind of a long period of time, so that no one is like very stressed out about it.
So, talking about compromising all 3 options, what do you guys think are like the best parts of each option that makes sense to combine into like a super option?
I feel like from the first option, I'm not saying that, like, we can only make certain things attainable and we have to tax, or limit how much water or electricity used per day. I'm just saying that maybe if we were to make, because our group talked a lot about how environmentally friendly options, like locally grown food, stuff like that, a lot of that tends to be more expensive than like their counterparts. So if we were to either make those cheaper or make the bad options like a little bit more expensive, that would be like a good thing to take from option 1. Option 2, just focusing more on the innovations would be really great, like in general, and just to make that more accessible to people who normally wouldn't be able to afford it. And in option 3, just, yeah, in general having, just make, like, because we also talked about how, like, a few years back, like, before, I don't know, maybe like in 2008, how like being green was like the cool thing to do, and it still is in some parts of like in California and Europe, like that's still a cool thing to do, but we just need to make that like the permanently cool thing to do.
Anyone else wanna give better points of the options?
I think, one way to combine option 1 and 2 would be to like, as we were talked about in our group, raising taxes on gas, and then taking that money from the government to put towards research and development, and then that way you can promote option 2 and try and expedite that process. And another thing is like how Gage was saying earlier with the super capacitors. I think that technology has like a lot of potential. But what we need to do now is develop infrastructure for it, so like it's actually available to people, and that comes from like the government. So the government just has to focus on increasing infrastructure.
No. All right. So, how does education play a role in all of that? In the trying to increase technology, is that focusing that putting that money in education, or they're putting that money in already established firms that work in that kind of stuff? What do you guys think about that?
I think it should be put more to research than education, because I feel like if you gave people who are in an educational setting a research opportunity, it could work out a lot better than if you just put it to education, because like we're already trying to figure it out. It's just like we need money to do the research and to be able to make things more efficient.
Anything else anyone wants to add? Okay, so we talked about some of the political backlash options. Should I wrap it up or not? Okay, so we talked about some of the political backlash options. We talked about, people being voted out of office, and it seems like the best way to make sure that doesn't happen is to inform people about what the consequences are of not doing anything. The consequences are of what we are doing, but that even though those consequences may be higher gas prices, that money is going to go towards research for finding better options. We talked about some of the things that might not work, like just complete drastic change as option 1 calls for, but option 2 gives the general public time to adjust. And we also talked about how the media plays a little bit of a role in this, and how getting the information out there, just kind of like the Coney video thing, it just needs to get out there, it needs to be true, and and then we talked about our super option kind of thing, which make the bad options more expensive, the options that aren't as environmentally friendly, make them more expensive for people, make technology more accessible, focus on that technology, and make being green cool permanently. Okay.
Okay, so in the first half, I was recording, so I really got to pay attention and like notice what everyone was saying. And I noticed that although there were a lot of there was really good discussion about option 1 and 2, option 3 wasn't really discussed. So is that because we don't really think that option 3 is a valid option? And we haven't even talked about really the positives of option 3 going into the other ones. So can I hear your opinion on option 3? Good.
Okay, well, I'm a strong advocate of option 3 because I believe that when people are passionate about something, especially in America, when like bad things go and people do crazy things, but because they feel like they're the right thing to do, like people will go to lengths if they feel like there's a cause that they care about enough. I just think that's our society. Like I know some of it is crazy sometimes, but people will throw out all the rational thinking if they believe something to be like, you know what I mean?
So
So you really think for for the super option that people need to care about, like we need to focus, we need to emphasize on caring about the environment, caring about what's happening.
Yeah, like I think just people, like what Sophia was saying, like definitely people need to know the facts of the situation, but it's not just enough to know the facts, it's you need to feel like you need to make a difference. Otherwise, it's just something that people are telling you to do.
And how do you think we can make that happen?
Oh my god, I have no idea. Yeah, does anyone help me out?
Do you have any?
Well, I think that getting people to care is a big step, but you also, like, people have to, for themselves, like, really, like, know that a change needs to be made. Because, like, we talked about the Coney video, and we all saw it, and we're like, yeah, that's horrible. But then what do we do about it? Or we see an ASPCA, like, commercial with the Sarah McLachlan song and the sad animals, and you're like, oh my god, that's so sad. But then what do you do about it? You just say it's sad, and then you don't do anything. So I think we really need to go beyond, like, feeling and caring to actually doing something. And that's, like, what's the hardest part.
I'm going to say that I think that option 3 is not a practical option, just because it's hard. It suggests that you should take Americans back to their old values and go back to a time when everyone was frugal and stuff. And I think it would be very hard as a progressive society to tell people to go backwards. And I know that's pretty cynical, but I think it's true. So I think that we've become so independent and so focused on like our path in life that it would be hard to tell people what to believe in without like causing a lot of problems.
So what do you think is the best way then to, like, which one options then do you prefer?
I prefer a mixture of 1 and 2.
1 or 2?
So I think 3 would be impossibly hard to implement.
Go ahead.
I think the ideas that are in option 3 are necessary to like bring attention to the environment, but I don't think it's the right like first step. I think that like a mixture between 1 and 2 would have to come first, and then option 3 would like naturally follow from that. Because if you get people to like realize what's going on in the environment and see how bad it is, then obviously they're gonna try to make changes in their lives, and that's gonna change their views on everything, and like it said, like transform our culture.
But do you think any changes will occur before people are mostly connected to it? Like I know it takes a lot to make a difference, and one of the biggest steps is to be mostly involved with it. So are you, like, what happens if it doesn't occur naturally? Then we're...
I mean, I think the biggest thing, I think something like really big would need to happen to change people's minds. The way things are now, it's not really like people know what's going on, but like you said, they just don't do anything about it because no one really has an emotional attachment to it. They're kind of like, you see like polar bears on like icebergs, like in the middle of nowhere, and they're kind of like, oh, that's sad, but me not driving to work today isn't gonna save that polar bear. And so they don't change their lifestyles. So it's something like, something big that would directly affect like the general public, and then would also give them like a way to
help out.
Yeah, like directly help out would be good.
So every individual needs to feel responsible instead of just saying, oh, someone else will do it?
Yeah.
What were you saying?
I was just gonna say, I don't think that option 3 by itself is enough to make any like significant changes, and I think she's right, like I don't think that it's gonna be possible to make anyone wanna go backwards in terms of giving up their individuality and stuff like that, but if we were to take bits and pieces from option 3 and just like kind of make it the socially acceptable and if anything socially like beneficial thing to do for you to choose like eco-friendly options, then I think that would contribute greatly to like the success of all 3 options. And the other thing is I think that it's very possible, because if we were to just go to different locations in the US, and I kept bringing this up in like our group discussions with San Francisco, which is still in the country, like every time I go to California, I see Priuses, like a bunch of Whole Foods, like in a 5-minute drive, and that's all locally grown food. And like they all have that attitude, so I think it'd be possible for the rest of us to adopt it, but that would take time.
Okay. Going to what Pete said is, I think that it would be, since Americans are very individualistic, you would have to make it their priority, like something that is good for them. But like, I feel like Americans really need a slap in the face, and that would either be like something happening in the environment that like caused us all to be like it would have to be very immediate to us, like it would have to be like in our country that would have to happen, or it would have to be the government like smacking us in the face and being like, hey, like this is a big issue, which would be like raising gas prices or something. We need to wake someone up because we are not like aware of the issue because it's like we're selfish. We're like, if it's not affecting me directly right now, why do I care about it?
So you kind of agree with like option one of like kind of making consequences for not being like for not helping the
Like if you
environment.
want something to happen right now, you either need to make something dramatic happen to us immediately in our lives that will make us like think that it is a big deal, or the environment is going to have to like earthquakes, I don't know, whatever. Something has to happen to us that will make us feel like it is immediately in our country.
I was just gonna add to that, I think that's like completely true, because I was just like, I don't know, I was just like, for whatever reason, just browsing the internet, and I found out like within like the next year or two, on the East Coast, the sea level, I don't know how to explain this correctly, but it's gonna rise by like I don't know, the water's gonna be 3 feet like closer to, do you guys know what I'm trying to say?
No.
Like I don't know how to explain that as eloquently
Like
as
it's
supposed to be
it's
explained.
taking over some of
Yeah, like 3
and it will
feet.
progressively.
Which is horrifying, like that's horrible, and that's gonna be terrible in terms of like the weather that we should be expecting when something like that happens, and not much is being done about it, which is like that's just terrifying.
Okay, so we really got to focus on option 3. Is there anything else anyone else wants to add, Craig? Go ahead.
I just want to like clarify what I was saying. I completely agree that option 1 and 2, like on a larger scale, need to take place first, because then people like, if there are no options, then like it's just a bunch of like hippies like saving the environment, you know what I mean? But I feel like on like a really minuscule scale, like someone needs to start with option 3, like those people who work in those businesses, like someone in there needs like, you know, like a CEO or something needs to be like, well, this is really important, we need to make these options available to the public. Do you know what I mean? It's like option 3 needs to start off in some places, but on a larger scale, option 1 and 2 need to be like the starting factors. And like I also think it's like I agree completely with what we're saying about how like something big needs to take place, and I think that's like really sad in a way, because I know that like for the huge earthquake in Japan, like that was when people started moving away from nuclear energy, because we had like some nuclear power plant here or whatever, and so it sucks to say, but I really think that something like that needs to happen.
Okay, so we have a lot about option 3 and how it's going to be like a required, like option 3 has to occur for the other ones to work, but we're hoping that it'll occur naturally later. Let's focus on the trade-offs that we get from each option. So let's focus like, I know a lot of people are saying like, let's raise gas prices, or let's have businesses put subsidies on certain things. What kind of problems are going to occur with that? Go ahead.
I think especially with the raised gas prices, you are going to have a lot of angry Americans. I mean, I remember when the gas prices went from like $2 to like $4 or $5, and everyone was so mad, and it was all I heard about all the time. And I think it might be necessary, but I think that it would cause, like, I probably couldn't drive anymore, which would be like very drastic in my life. Like, I would be very upset about it. So I think you would have a lot of people opposing it, and like I said, like, there would probably be political backlash. Like, I think you would vote people out of office who supported that, unless there was like a very strong case that the environment is going to collapse down.
So are there any options that we could have, like, similar to raising gas prices, but will be able to actually work in the long run? Because, as she said, if we do raise gas prices, they're just going to vote people out that allow that, and someone else is going to say, oh no, I'll lower gas prices, we'll come right in. So is there, does anyone have any idea of something that can make people really think, but they'll eventually like, accept?
I think you could raise gas prices so like minimally that people could still afford it, but like if you think about how many people pay for gas every day, like even if you just raised it a little bit, there would be so much money that went to like research. So I think that people are more inclined to raise gas prices by like $1. You shouldn't do that. Like you should raise it by a couple cents or something like that. And by the quantity of gasoline that is consumed every day, like I think it would actually end up helping.
I think the flaw with our option 1 and 3 are specifically because it's working on a small scale. They're looking at individual communities and nations. To have global sustainability, you can't focus on just America or Europe. You have to focus on every single country as a whole. Changing gas prices in one country isn't going to affect the entire world. It's only going to affect, say, America and what they're doing for America. You have to do something that's globally. Changing something in one country, any country, doesn't matter, even if it's America, if it's a larger place like all of Asia, nothing like that's going to affect the world as much as, because you're not making something that's happening for the entire world.
So what kind of steps can we take to achieve that though? Like that's kind of where I'm trying to go with the discussion is we kind of have these ideals of what needs to happen, but now we need to talk about what's going to make this stuff happen and if it's going to work. Pete?
Off of what Gage said, yes, changing something in one country isn't really going to do something for the whole world, but America uses 25% of fossil fuels in the whole world. So changing something here would make a big difference, and America is kind of seen today as a global leader or a superpower pretty much in the world, and so if we were to make a change like that and bring more attention to it, and if people became more active in America, other countries would follow suit and kind of change their views too. Because I definitely think we're kind of like, not that we're like the best country, but we're kind of a role model for a lot of smaller countries.
I was just going to say that I think we do need to focus a little bit more on communities and cities, because if we were to just like raise the prices for gas and raise the prices for electricity and certain amounts of water, that would be like the effects of that would be incredibly disproportionate depending on the part of the country that you're looking at. For example, in countries like in cities like New York City, public transport's much more accessible. People generally
So gas prices would not be
exactly it wouldn't affect them nearly as much. So if we were to try and make like nationwide changes, it would have to be something that would affect everyone on a somewhat equal scale. Otherwise, it won't be fair, especially to people in rural areas, poor people, stuff like that.
Do you have any ideas?
I have no
No
idea.
ideas.
That was
Okay.
that was all I had.
Okay.
We kind of, actually, you proposed that we put sidewalks like in urban areas, like, I mean, not urban, like suburban areas. I feel like, I don't know, people would be more inclined to walk, yeah, rather than like, cause you know, on like some roads it's just a highway, and you know, like within neighborhoods it's just like major streets without any sidewalks, like, people don't wanna walk, I don't know, Gage, you said you like to walk, right?
And maybe something like
You'd be more inclined to like walk instead of drive.
maybe something like promoting the use of bicycles, like maybe one of the ideas, because I hear everyone saying like there needs to be like smaller changes that will, in the end, create bigger changes. Something like promoting bicycle use, maybe putting sales on bicycles, something like that. Go ahead.
I think that we also need to emphasize the small differences, like actually make a change, because I remember, like somebody told me that like if I recycle a water bottle, like who's gonna care? Like no one. So I think a lot of people have settled into that mindset that's like I can't actually help. I'm one person. Like if I recycle this water bottle, like nothing will happen. It's no different than if I didn't, which is kind of wrong but kind of true at the same time. So I think it would have to be emphasized again that like each individual can make a difference, even though I don't know if that's necessarily true.
I mean, if in a country that has millions of people, if all of those people recycle one water bottle a day, it does make a difference. So really
Yeah.
promoting those individual changes that people can make.
I know that also we have like once a year, I think it's like Earth Hour, whatever, do you guys know what I'm talking
When
about?
people like shut off the lights.
Yeah,
and
for an
like-
hour. And I think, you know, everyone gets really excited, like, oh, Earth Hour, like, it's so great. I think instead of like annually, if we did that like biannually, like it's really not a big deal. I feel like that would actually help a lot, you know,
And she
quarterly, whatever.
And she brought up like this thing like that I had no idea even existed. It's like Blackle, is that what you said?
Yeah,
I checked that out. That was
Blackle's
awesome.
so cool, right?
It's
That's
literally
amazing.
Google. It's like Google's program, except they have a black screen, an entirely black screen, and it saves energy. Like they show you in the little corner, it shows you how much energy they save. So if Google were just to implement that, like, I use Google every single day, and I'm not the only one. So if
Yeah.
people were to change that, like, if like Google were to just make that the standard, that would like, I mean, the billions of people that you, like, because America's not the only country that uses Google. So if the billions of people that do use Google were to like have a black screen, that would probably end up saving a good amount of energy.
So I hear that everyone agrees that the individual changes that we can make in our daily life will make more of a difference than some of the bigger concepts we were talking about. So do we have any more like individual ideas? Go for
Sorry, I'm
it.
talking a lot.
You're
But
fine,
I
go
do
for
think that there has to be a big, like, I think there has to be both, because if you don't, I mean, you need to tell Americans that it's a big deal, otherwise they won't make the individual changes. So I think that something drastic has to happen in the country as a whole first. Because then people will be like, oh, it's a really big deal, we should probably start doing this now. Because I'll tell you right now, I mean, as an American, like, I don't focus on this issue very much. I don't even think about it most of the time. Like, I throw away some water bottles, probably today.
Go for it.
I think, like, when you're talking about an issue like this that affects the whole world, it's hard to think about it only on an individual level, because you're like, what am I gonna do that's gonna affect the whole world? But I think you have to start thinking about it individually, like, if I recycle this water bottle, and then maybe 100 other people probably have the same mindset, they're gonna recycle water bottles. And like, when you start to make the change individually, it becomes, then it can become a community thing, then like spread nationally. Like you said, when you were in California, they have like Whole Foods and stuff, and it's more, like that started individually, and then like a couple, and then it got expanded. And everything's just gonna keep expanding if we make it a point to, you know, do it individually. And then we can think about it on a global scale, because it's just gonna get bigger and bigger from the things we do individually.
Yeah, like I know one time, like I drink a lot of bottled water a day, and one day my friend was collecting theirs for one of their committees or something, and just for like a week, I saved water bottles for her. And you don't realize how much of that stuff you normally just throw away. So like every individual does matter. But so we have the individual things, we kind of have the big things like raising gas prices, and what other kind of big things need to happen to make a difference?
Public transit should be more accessible everywhere. Like I mean, I live in New Jersey, so like it's very easy for me to take a train into New York, but anywhere else within New Jersey, if I want to go anywhere, I have to drive.
Yeah.
So like it needs to be a more accessible
Like, you
option.
can go into cities, so like, only very big ones, like,
Mhm.
you go to Philly or to New York, but like, if you wanted to go to another place in Jersey, you could not. I agree with that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Although like up front, of course it would be really expensive, but in the long run I think it would save not only money for individuals, like just to buy like a couple bus tickets or whatever, rather than like spend your money on gas. And like save the environment and make people smarter.
Anyone else? Anybody haven't heard of? Do you have any ideas on anything, not just what we're directly talking about?
I mean, this is a little bit more closely tied with like the culture thing, and I don't want to like reopen this, but I think people just need to be like accepting of more eco-friendly options, just because I live right by the beach, and like we have like this long 6-mile beach that there was literally like one part of it they wanted to, those winds, you know what I'm talking about? Like the big thing that's you get energy from them. They wanted to install some of those literally at the very end of the beach, and people were against it, so they ended up not doing it. Like, and that could have gotten a lot. Like that would have been really good. So I think that just has to be yeah.
Yeah, the attitude of NIMBY, it's not in my backyard, so. This is just, as I've been